Support for the Dice Tower comes from listeners like you, and from The Op, also known as USAopoly, and from GameNerds.com. Thanks for your support. The Dice Tower, episode 710.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Four. Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, Jeff says, take it away, and we answer questions about take-that games, comparing the evolution of board games to video games, and managing the confluence of game complexity and inebriation level at a pub game night. Then we reach the final stop on our Alphabet Express with our top 10 games that start with a numeral. I'm Eric Summerer, and joining me now, the 12 to my 9, Tom Vassell.
I don't understand this 12 to my 9.
It's a Doctor Who reference.
I don't want to be 12? Wait, do I want to be 12? I don't know all the numbers.
Actually, no, I didn't want to be 9. I want to be 10. I'm going to change that.
Who's 10?
10 is Tennant.
Yes, he's the best Doctor. Although,
yeah, I want to be
watched,
10.
To me, it's David Tennant is number 1, but Matt Smith is right behind him.
He was a lot of fun.
Like right on his tail. My kids like him the best. And then And then I'm only going by the new ones. I know, blah blah blah, old doctors. I just can't get into the old stuff. I've tried. It's
sure.
I don't know. I'm kind of mixed around. I don't have a problem with any of the other doctors, but they're kind of live and die in the strength of their companions.
I really liked Clara. She was a lot of fun. So her two doctors were also quite good for me.
Yeah, and I like that. Was her name Billy? Billy.
Yes.
Okay, we're getting very Doctor Who here. Sorry, folks. This is actually a show about board games.
We're getting into the weeds here.
And there's not very many good Doctor Who games. Like, almost none. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. There was that cooperative dice game that just didn't quite land for me. There's some old school ones that are entertaining, but not fantastic. I think you're right. We need a better Doctor Who game, but it's hard. It's such a unique property that doesn't necessarily fit with game mechanics very well.
Sure, but I think you're better off if you're going to do Doctor Who. They should do the Rick and Morty thing where they just pick an episode of Doctor Who.
That is a good idea.
And then just do that episode.
The good one is the 12 Doctors, but that was the print and play fan-made game that ended up as a published game that wasn't Doctor Who related, that wasn't nearly as well received, if I recall correctly. Anyway, we've gone off into the weeds again.
Well, no, now we're talking about board games, so I feel like it's a much more thing. So the 12 Doctors Doctor Who board game, I'm looking it up on the internet, self-published, web-published.
Yeah.
But it doesn't...
Card game, 2-player card game, you're battling. It has a little bit of a battle line feel to it. Where you're battling over the past, the present, and the future, and playing lots of cards. One player's the master, one player's the doctor, going through its iterations. It's a really solid game. It just, because it's a Doctor Who game, it will never see the light of day as a Doctor Who game.
Well, what do you do? Alrighty. Well, folks, there's a lot going on. So the Dice Tower studio is finally set up.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I would say it's about 95% done. I mean, there's still like little things. We still need to add more foam for sound, and it's getting into a new workflow. I'm just excited to work in the library. Every day now, I work on the library.
Okay.
Today, I just finished shelf 1 out of 25 is completely done.
Okay, until a new game comes out.
No. I mean, sure, I might switch things around, but I went through every game. I threw away a lot of inserts. Inserts are just not great for storing games vertically at all.
Yeah, it's true. They don't really do a great job unless they're specifically built to hold it vertically with like a lid or something.
Right. So I'm removing inserts. There's a few inserts I leave in, but I'm removing most of them. I'm laminating score sheets. I am removing solo game components.
Because
they don't need to be in a convention setting. And I'm
Is
also
Mike DeLisio like gathering those things and like scuttling them into a corner?
he just has his own, I guess. I'm not throwing them away yet, but I it's one of those things where I'm like, why am I not throwing these away? Because
it's hard.
I have them all stored, but then if I like, oh, let's play the sole version of this game, I got to search through a pile of like 70 of them. I'm also pulling expansions out of some games. Because
it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, expansions are a tough one. It's really tough when you get to a convention, open up a game, and you're like, oh, it's everything. Mm-hmm. And it can be really overwhelming, especially if you never played the game before. So
yeah, it's a tough call because you also want to have the definitive version of the game on the shelf. And so what is the best way to play a particular game? Maybe it is with all of the extra expansion characters and content and stuff, and maybe it's not.
Right. So and then I'm also adding better plastic bags and quality our containers, those plastic containers. I'm putting them in every game because they're fantastic. So I finished, like I said, shelf 1. The shelves are organized. We have 23 completely full shelves. 24 is halfway full, and 25 is pretty empty. But I just put 6 games getting ready to be added. And in fact, 3 of the games I'm talking about today out of 3 are going into the Dice Tower library.
Okay.
But just remember, just because a game goes in the Dice Tower library doesn't mean I like it. I just think other people will.
Right.
So, Eric, tell me a game I should put in the Dice Tower library.
Well, I don't know if this is necessarily one you should put in the library, but I will start by talking about it because we're going with sort of a light to heavy mode for this episode. The first game I want to talk about is one from R&R Games. It's called Pass the Pot. This is a push your luck dice game. It comes in a small circular tin, a cylindrical tin. It's got a bunch of dice, 6 dice specifically, in 2 sets, and a bunch of tokens, plastic money tokens. You're given some starting money, and the goal is to get to, I think, 24 coins. You are going to start by putting 2 of these little coins into the pot, which is the lid of the container, and you're going to roll 1 of the sets of dice. And these dice are 1 through 5 and a letter. So there is a P, an O, and a T die. So if you rolled the letters on all 3 dice, you'd get pot. If you roll that, you get whatever's in the pot immediately. You win that round. Normally, though, you're going to roll once, maybe twice for free, and you can spend a coin into the pot to roll a 3rd time. And then you're going to hopefully score. If you manage to get a run, 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, etc., you will get some sort of bonus. If you get a triple of a particular type, you're going to get some sort of bonus. Sometimes it's stealing money from your opponents, getting stuff from the bank, and just sort of some sort of extra money that you're going to acquire. If you get triple ones, though, you zonk out, you pay some money into the pot, and you lose your turn. No matter whether you score a bonus or not, though, you're going to put those dice that you scored in front of you. That is your value that you have out there. Then the next player takes the second set of dice and does the same thing, hoping to beat your set. It's just the numerical value of what you rolled. The letters are worth 0. If they beat you, then they become the new champion, and then you pass your set of dice to the next player. And once it goes around the table and no one has beaten the set of dice, that player wins the pot and you reset for another round. That is about it. You're hoping to maybe get those combinations and score bonuses and get high-scoring combinations to last the round. This is an exceedingly simple game. I think they're aiming for that very light family group of players. This is the sort of thing you pull out where you don't want to think too hard and you're playing with grandma. And you don't want to have to explain the rules for very long at all. It's exceedingly simple. And as such, I think it's too simple for me. It's cute, it's well produced, but I think it's almost too mindless. I'd like to have a few more decisions to make and not just the luck of the roll. And especially with only like 3 players, which is what I was playing it at, it wasn't quite deep enough for me. It was too easy for one player to just get a lucky roll and win the round, and then the same player to do it again, and then the other players can't really catch up. So I think if you're looking for that easily portable, in a tin, family game, this is a good hit, but I don't think it's one for a hobbyist gamer group. It's just a little too shallow. That's Pass the Pot from R&R Games.
This looks very mass markety.
It very much is.
That's interesting.
It comes in a blister pack.
Yeah, I don't think that's a big deal because it's in a tin in the blister pack. So I don't have a problem with that, but you're right. It was made to be put on shelf stores.
Sure. I have an extra copy if you want me to bring you one time.
Huh. So my next game, my first game, and here's the thing. Eric put his in order of heaviness. I'm putting mine in order of how much I like them. So, well, ish. The first two I'm fairly similar on. Anyway,
Fine, I'll do that too.
Merchant's Cove. Merchant's Cove is a game from Final Frontier, and it's a game where you are selling goods to a bunch of willing buyers and trying to make money doing so. In other words, a typical Euro. You're doing this by essentially a worker movement game where you have a worker that you're moving around your board. But where this game is very different than pretty much any game out there is that each player is playing a completely different game. Let me rephrase that. You're all playing the same game, but the way you're playing it on your own private board is very different. So this is a not 100%, but it's like 70% asymmetrical, as in think of Root or games like that. So each person is in the middle of the table is a board where there's ships, and people are jumping off these ships and buying goods. And you're selling red, blue, yellow, and green goods, small and large sizes of each. But the way you produce your goods is completely different. One player, for example, I think they're the alchemist. I might have the names wrong on what they are. I just go by what they do. It has a little marble mechanism, and they're dropping marbles down. It's like a mini, what's a potion explosion type thing. And they do that, and they're producing potions, and then they sell the potions. But their potion is the same as an artifact from another player. One person's a time traveler, jumping around in time, manipulating time to go back and get items and sell them. Another person's a pirate, going around and digging up treasure or just catching fish and selling those. Another person is a smith, where they are smithing items, and that's dice placement. So the pirate is kind of going out and flipping tiles over, searching. The smith is manipulating dice to get what you want. And then they even sell some expansions. There's even an expansion where you can play a roll and write game as your thing. So this is really fascinating, right? It's really interesting. The components are fantastic, and it works. As far as I can tell, I don't know. As far as I can tell, they seem pretty balanced. My problem is I'm not in love with the main game. And the idea of the game is cooler than the game itself. So when I play the game, so let's say I play the first time I played Time Travelers. Okay, that's cool. Oh, yeah, it wasn't amazing, but it was cool. I was like, well, I'm doing time traveling, and you're doing pirates. And then my second game, I played Alchemist, and I was like, oh, that's cool. But by the time I'm done, if all four games were the Alchemist, for example, if all the players were playing the Alchemist, I don't know that the game would get any buzz at all. The buzz is that you're playing four different games, but I don't know that any of those games is fantastic.
Right. Sort of the 504 problem.
Yes. Also, it has the problem of, what's Jeff's game? Space
Space Cadets.
Space Cadets, where if I'm teaching this, I'm like, oh boy.
Because each one is a totally different
there
mechanism.
There is a little
game
rule book for each one. So there's that. It's just that you could be like, well, you can play 4 times in a row and you play 4 different ways. Sure, but I could also buy 4 small games and do the same thing.
Okay.
I think some people are going to really like it. Mike really enjoys the game. He gave it a seal of excellence. He really likes it. Okay. So it's a bigger deal for him, and it's a little all over the place. It may be your jam. It certainly has really good production values. After their last game before this, I think was Coloma. They're just okay. Final Frontier. I have not enjoyed many of their games. I think they're over, that they have not developed them enough. This one is clearly developed. That's not a problem. My problem, I think, is just that I think the idea is cooler than the game. Now, I'd play this before I play 504, because in 504 I would be worried to play a bad game.
Okay,
right? I don't know if I might play a game that's just not fun. And for folks, if you don't know what we're talking about, 504 is a game by Friedemann Friese where he had 9 modules, and you would pick 3 modules and shove them together, and then there was 504 different games.
Right.
It worked, but if you're saying I never heard of this game, there's that. You can now buy the game for a song.
Yeah.
So Merchant's Cove is also a big grandiose game. I think I wonder, Eric, that you might like it.
Okay. Interesting.
And I didn't play the expansions. I thought it was neat that there was a roll and write. There's one that's like you have a little farm and you're farming things. And it's like, oh, wow, you could plug and play into this all day long, probably.
Okay.
But I don't like the middle game.
All right.
So that outer game doesn't matter to me. Anyway, that's Merchant's Cove. And I believe it's the same designer as Coloma, which is Johnny Pack, if I'm correct there. But let me check it because I don't want to give the wrong name. Merchant's Cove was designed by, Johnny Pack, Carl Van Ostrand, and Drake Villarreal.
Okay. Well, I should probably listen to that recommendation because not too long ago you talked about a game here on the show called Beyond the Sun, and you suggested that this might very well be my jam. And so when Board Game Arena threw it up on their site, I rushed to try it out. And well, spoiler alert, you were right, Tom. I really have enjoyed Beyond the Sun. It is a game by Dennis K. Chan, produced in physical form by Rio Grande Games, but again, I played this on Board Game Arena, where it is now available out of beta just recently. In Beyond the Sun, you are colonizing planets, but you are really focusing on this tech tree. There are various technologies in level 1, 2, 3, and 4 that get more and more complex, have action spaces that give you abilities for creating resources, increasing your ability to make those resources. You've got sort of a resource engine that you're working with to get you population and ships that are going to help you colonize these planets and fly around and achieve victory points for doing so. It's all actions like, jump 3 spaces or turn these resources into ships or increase the power of these ships or to use your population to learn these technologies. And as you unlock more and more of this tech tree, you get more and more opportunities to do more powerful actions. There are then bonuses for achieving certain technologies or colonizing a certain number of planets or all sorts of stuff, a lot of collective goals that you're racing to achieve. But it is all surrounding this little map with the planets on it and this tech tree and how those abilities sort of show up on the board. Some abilities won't show up in a particular game. Others will be connected to different ones in a particular game. It's semi-randomized for the tier 1s and then fully randomized for the other tiers. It's fun. I really enjoy it. A lot of moving pieces for sure. It is possible to get yourself into a hole. Like if you've got ore and population that are your primary resources here, and it is possible to get yourself stuck where you don't have any ore, and then it's hard to build that system back up again if you haven't
can take it as like
maintained.
your last action.
You can get ore as the last thing, but if at the beginning of your turn you have no ore,
well, then you have to take a very. You got to do something else.
Right. You have to not do that to yourself, but it is possible to do so. That doesn't mean I dislike it. It means it's possible. I really enjoyed Beyond the Sun. One of the guys in my physical game group, whom I'm actually going to get to see this weekend, I finally get to go back to my game group this weekend, picked up a physical copy, so I may get a chance to actually feel those dice. The resources and ships and stuff are represented by these dice where you don't roll them. There's a resource side and a people side and then 4 ship sides for the different values there. And that's how those are represented on the board, which is a cool use of dice. Anyway, Beyond the Sun, I really enjoyed, and it's on Board Game Arena, so you can try it out.
So Eric mentioned that he's going back to his game group. So yes. I had people over for I've had obviously the guys in the studio, but I had gamers over this past Saturday, and they came and they saw the library. Ooh, the selection is great. So what I've always done for gaming, for as long as I can remember, I just pull games out. Like, I'm testing this out. I always tell people if they come over, we're going to be play testing games, playing games. Yep. It might not be the first time I've played it, but it's going to be the first time you've played it, when you come over. So that happens a lot.
Yep.
And so we played an okay game, and then we played a very good game on Saturday. And I said, you know what? We have this library here. Because honestly, the first hour, nothing got done. We didn't even play a game because people just stared at the library and talked about the games. Sure. And I said, let's play a game I already know. Let's play a game I like. Let's end on a positive note. And I really wanted to play Beyond the Sun, actually. That was one I was pointing to. But I forgot what it's like to do that. Because everyone was just like, ooh. And someone would be like, what about this one? And someone else would go, nah, I'm not in the mood for that. And I thought, oh my word, I forgot about this. That's like a blast for the past. Because I just haven't done that for the longest time.
Hemming and hawing.
The hemming and hawing. And, you finally, someone's like, I'm going to play this, but you kind of sometimes settle by playing a game that no one is thrilled about. In this case, we didn't. We played Smartphone. Right. Okay. Smartphone is a very good game. But it reminded me of that. And I thought, oh, I forgot about that this existed. And then Eric mentioned his group, and his group doesn't do that.
No, I was going to say there's a solution to this.
Well, yes, but I think the solution to me is worse than the problem. For me, anyway.
Okay.
Because I don't want to go to a game night and end up playing a game I don't really care to play.
Well, it's all about cultivating that group. 1 week I might play a game I'm not as excited about, but that means that my friends will be ready to play the game I want to play when it is my pick.
Yeah, I know. See, here I've run into a couple problems here. This is very real stuff here. With COVID, even though things are getting better and vaccinations and all, there's no big meetups. Right. Like the store hasn't opened up, and so when I have people over to my house. So I could do things like say, hey, are you vaccinated or whatever? Okay, that's fine. But then I'll be like, okay, I have a table. And if someone else wants to run a table, then we can have 2 tables. But I know maybe 50 gamers in my area. Who do I ask to come over? And it feels like you're picking you literally are picking and choosing.
Right.
But it doesn't feel good because I'm not cutting anyone for any particular reason.
Right.
And then it's also awkward because you'll be like, hey, Sam, do you want to come over? And then you wait. Sam's like, I don't know yet. Okay, I can come. Can I bring my girlfriend? Okay, great. That's 2. But I can't ask anyone else yet, because I don't know how many people are coming. It's just It's an interesting thing. I'll be glad when that's over.
You almost need to create your own pick list for the invite list.
Well, sure. I guess I could
people.
do that. Again, I always warn people I'm going to be playing games no one's played before, and it does not chase off that many people because they're always hoping to play the next latest thing.
That's true. Yep. It's that thrill of the hunt.
All right. Well, speaking of the greatest thing, as always, any game that Jamie Stegmaier comes out with from Stonemaier Games is going to be a big deal, and Red Rising is certainly that. It's his newest game to come out this year. I got it much later than most of the gaming world. I think I got it in the mail just like everybody else did when it came in. But I had read lots and lots of reviews. I heard about it. And in fact, when I first heard about it, I went and read the series Red Rising because I had not read them before. And I thought, well, Jamie said that's his favorite book series. I should read them. It will help me with the game, blah, 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 blah. And it's there's a 5-book series for it, but it's kind of, I think, in 2 trilogies. So I've read the first trilogy, and then I stopped because I didn't want to read 2 books and then have to wait for the third one. The new trilogy kind of the first trilogy ended on a very positive note, or at least on a final note. And I was like, all right, cool. I like that a lot. I don't want to be George R.R. Martin. So Jamie said that he wanted to do this game for a long time, Red Rising, because he was waiting for a game, and then he and the other game designer, they played Fantasy Realms.
Okay.
And I think you played Fantasy Realms, Eric.
Yes.
Yeah, Fantasy Realms is a really simple game. Small deck of cards. You have a hand of 7 cards. You switch these cards in and out the whole game until the game ends. It's not a very long game. And then you score your hand. It could take possibly longer to score the game than it does to play it. That's not quite true, and there's apps that help you score it faster now, but still. It's a game I really like.
I'm thinking of a different game. I'm not sure what game you're talking about. Fantasy Realms is not the Star Realms fantasy version.
No, that's Hero Realms.
Ah! Then I don't know what you're talking about.
If it makes you feel better, you are not the first or even second person to make that mistake. It's in, these people, come on, name your games a little bit more dramatically so we don't get them mixed up.
Yeah. Call it Penguin Realms or something.
Okay, so you haven't played Fantasy Realms then. It's a little game from Z-Man. I highly recommend it, Eric. I think you would like it.
Okay. Hey, Future Eric here with a couple of quick updates on that last point. One, Fantasy Realms was just nominated for the Kennerspiel des Jahres, which is kind of cool since we just mentioned it. Also, Tom misspoke. It is published in the U.S. by WizKids Games, not Z-Man Games. But I still need to go check it out, especially after the nomination. Anyway, back to past Eric and Tom.
Red Rising takes that game and adds more stuff to it. You have this big deck of cards that's made up of 14 different factions because there are 14 castes in this dystopian future people are separated by color. There's gold and red. They're the golds are kind of the bad guys, the reds are the good guys, sort of. It's more nuanced than that. And then there's a whole bunch of other colors: red, green, purple, obsidian, etc. And the book is this big. The first book is a little Hunger Games-ish. The second and third book are very space opera, big grandiose style books. So they're very interesting. The theme is a little in this game. In this game, you start with a handful of 5 cards. On your turn, you play a card down, and that card gives you an action. You then pick another card up. There's 4 locations you play a card into. So you play a card on top of that location, and then you pick a card up that's at the top of another location and add that card to your hand. The location that you take the card from gives you some sort of special action, which is like move a spaceship up a track. The farther up that track, points at the end of the game. Take some helium. Helium's 3 points at the end of the game. Or put a cube in a academy, and whoever has the most cubes there gets extra points at the end of the game. So on and so forth. You keep doing this till a few things happen, and there's victory conditions. And at the end of the game, you also reveal all the cards in your hand. Each card is worth a base number of points. 5, 10, whatever. But there are also bonus points if you've met certain criteria. Like, one character will say, plus 15 points if they're with this character. Minus 15 points if they're with this character. Plus 3 points for every purple card in your hand. Stuff like that. That's very interesting, and I like it. I like building the hand of cards. My problem with this game is, as much as I wanted to like it, and I don't even dislike it. I'll play it. It's an interesting game, but every time I play it, I'm thinking, Fantasy Realms did this much smoother, much faster.
Okay. And
because there's 14 colors in the books, there's 14 different factions in the game, that dilutes the deck. So if I get a card that says, this works well with a pink card, I'm like, man, I sure hope a pink card shows up.
Okay.
Because it might not. So I feel like you can sometimes have a great game where all your cards just work together, and sometimes you don't. There's a few other problems I have. There's a deluxe version and a normal version of the game. I managed to get a copy of both, and I'm getting rid of the deluxe version because it's pretty bad. It comes with metal cubes instead of wooden cubes, and you cannot tell the colors apart very well at all.
Oh.
It comes with a plastic insert, which is problematic. The pieces fall out of it. The cards are foil stamped, which is cool until you realize you can see that stamp sometimes through the other side of the card.
Oh.
And there's these little stands, these plastic stands that you can put your cards in, that if someone who's 20 miles away breathes, they fall over. If there's one thing we don't do in a Dice Tower is exaggerate.
Yes.
Ever. But yeah, so that's problematic. I'm putting the normal copy in the Dice Tower library.
Okay.
I think a lot of people are going to like this game. Well, I know a lot of people are going to like this game because I see it online. It's the same thing. It's ranked fairly highly on Board Game Geek, but I I'll pass on it for the most part for a bunch of those reasons. I also think the theme is barely there. You look at all the characters and the artwork's amazing. I'm like, oh, that's that character. And, oh, this character gets points if they're with this character. That makes sense. And that's where the theme ends. Which is okay. I don't really care that strongly about it. I just think it could have been anything. It could have been Harry Potter. It could have been Doctor Who. Well, probably not Doctor Who. That doesn't make sense, but...
You never know.
Anyway, that's Red Rising.
Ah, neat. I'm interested to give it a whirl. I watched the animatic, the animation of the video, the Kickstarter video, many times, or the pre-order video, but I haven't had a chance to actually see it in person. So last for me is another one that Tom recommended for me to play several episodes back, and I actually went out to try and buy it, and it wasn't out yet. Tom often gets like pre-release copies of things, and then I get excited about it and I can't get it yet. So I waited patiently until The Initiative became available. This is Corey Konechka's puzzle game, cooperative puzzle game, adventure. Tom, again, talked about it a little while back, so I won't go into too much detail, but you are... It's like a game within a game situation. There's scenarios that are in a comic book. You're playing kids who have acquired a game called The Key at a garage sale, and they're playing it, and the scenarios are their gaming sessions as they play through this game. The basic mechanics of the game are that you're moving around the board, finding tokens that have symbols on them. And those symbols relate to I call it a Wheel of Fortune board. It's like a plastic rack that has a puzzle behind it. Often it's a scramble puzzle or some sort of cipher or code. And so the symbols that you acquire on the board will relate to that, like one of the hidden letters behind this panel. And so you can flip up all the doors that match that symbol. And often you're trying to solve the puzzle like you would in Wheel of Fortune. And once you do that, you win.
Fortune. Sorry.
Yay! I have not yet scored a dining room set in this game.
So I want a dining room set. That'd be a great nice prize right now.
So you in order to acquire these tokens, you're moving around the board by playing cards. You have a set of numerical cards from 1 to 12 in, I think, 3 different suits. And you have 4 actions. One is moving, one is intel, so revealing tokens that are face down. All the tokens are face down at the beginning. And one is acquiring the tokens in the room that you are in. And then the last one is this reset action. And you have to do that because you have to play all the cards on these actions in not sequential, but ascending order. So once I play a 4, if I want to trigger that action again, I have to play at least a 5 to do that action again, unless I play the reset action to remove all the cards from that action pile and put them in the discard. But I can only do that so many times, and I can never reset the reset action. And you trek along like this in try and solve the puzzle, or it's possible that once you go through the deck once, you add these time cards, and if you get too many of those in the discard pile, then you lose. You can also lock yourself out. If you totally freeze up all of your actions, you can lose that way too. I have played 5 missions in this game so far and have enjoyed it tremendously. The missions go very fast. It's simple enough that my kids can enjoy it, although they have not jumped in yet. I've so far played this solo. The puzzles are fun, and I'm enjoying how gradually things are being revealed. Again, I won't get into any spoilers here, but there is an overarching story and stuff to explore and discover and codes to unlock, and it's sort of cool to discover something and go, oh, wait a minute, I think I saw something about that earlier. Connecting the dots and everything. So I'm excited to see where the initiative ends up, and I am certainly enjoying the journey so far.
So maybe you said it and I missed it. Did you say how far you had gotten in it?
5 missions. Out of 14 that are listed on the back of the rule book, although there's more mission cards than that, and I'm not sure why yet. I'm sure I'll find out eventually.
That's not a spoiler, Eric. It's because when you're done with the story, you can still play.
Okay.
Did you like the game? See, that's my problem. I just couldn't get into the game. I love the puzzle part.
Yep.
But the game felt like it was getting in the way of that.
I remember you were saying that. I think it has enough tension in playing these cards and having to work around what you happen to draw. As you flip over some of these tokens, they will lock out actions. So I might flip up something that says, you can't do the intel action anymore until you reset that pile, do the regroup action. And that suddenly, that my plan may have been to intel as much as I could or play specific cards on that pile, and now I can't do that. The timing of when I reset my hand. There are adversaries that show up and sort of get in your way at some point in the missions. And yeah, I find it it's a little like Horrified, at least in the collection of items. It feels a little bit like that, running around the board and avoiding the baddies and still utilizing your resources to get the stuff you need. It feels a little like that. So I wasn't bothered by it like you were. Maybe I will be in another 3 or 4 missions. But so far, after 5, I'm still pretty excited.
Alrighty. Well, speaking of excited, I'd like to talk about a little game called Destinies. Destinies.
It's your density.
Yes, thank you. Destinies is from Lucky Duck Games. And characters are exploring a dark medieval fantasy land as they race to fulfill their destiny. That's the tagline for the game.
Okay.
It is essentially a mix between Chronicles of Crime and Seventh Continent.
Well, okay.
That's not really an exaggeration, but here's another thing. It's competitive. So this is, well, it's competitive if you play 2 to 3 players. If you play 1 player, you're playing on your own. But anyway,
I win.
It's 1 to 3 players, and each player is picking a character, and there's different scenarios. Now, this game, if you hate games with apps, folks, fast forward because you're not going to like this. This uses an app in and fully. And so you'll play a scenario. So the base game comes with 5 scenarios. They are replayable, though it recommends you don't play it with someone who hasn't played it. Like, if me and Eric played scenario 1, we can go back and play it together, but I shouldn't play it with Joe, because if Joe hasn't played it, because I'll whoop up on him. I'll know things he doesn't know.
Yeah.
The scenarios are about 2.5 hours long, and you get some characters at the beginning of the game, and you get a card, and on the back of the card, it gives you some motivation, like what you're doing. It gives you your goals. So you have a choice of 2 different goals to reach. And then it puts a map tile out in the middle of the table. You stand on that map tile, and it shows you a few map tiles that are next to it, and you start on your turn. You pick a location that's within 2 spaces of you. If it's a location that hasn't been revealed yet, you reveal it. The app will tell you what to do. It will put some points of interest on that location, and you will occasionally pick. Well, no, you won't occasionally. You'll always pick a point of location and deal with it, and it will give you a bunch of options, and you can do some or all the options. And at some point, when you're done, you end your turn. So, like for example, this is not necessarily in a game, but I might be at a store, and I might have an option to buy stuff there, and there's some cards of items I can buy. I might have an option to steal stuff from the store. I might have an option to talk to the storekeeper about a rumor, things like that. And many times when you do these options, and there's a lot of fighting and things that go on, you have to make a test. And this is what the game does, in my opinion, in a brilliant fashion. The game has these tracks. You have mind, dexterity, and strength, I think, or the tracks. These tracks have 2 to 12 in front of you. No, 1 to 12. Sorry, 1 to 12. And at the beginning of the game, it will tell you to put some discs in a track. So it might say, for example, Eric, if you start out as the hunter, it might say you have a disc in 5, 7, 11, and 12 of strength.
Okay.
So you put these discs in there. Whenever you make a test in this game, you always roll 2 dice. These dice are numbered 1 to 4. But you also can get extra dice. These dice are purple dice. You can get up to 3 extra dice. Every turn you get a purple die back. But when you use a purple die, it's gone until you get it back again. So you can, and there's other things that can give you the dice back. So you can choose to roll the purple dice that can add to your roll. So let's say Eric has a strength test that he needs to do. The app says make a strength test. Eric rolls, and he rolls and he gets a 6 on the dice that he rolls. He then looks at his strength track, and let's say he has strength at 5, 7, 11, and 12. Only 5 is 6 or below, so he has 1 success. If you had rolled a 12 somehow, you would have 4 successes. The game is constantly giving you experience tokens that let you move these discs to your left and make them lower. So when I do that, I'm like, oh, so my lowest one's a 5. I'm going to lower it down so that I always succeed on that. Or should I move that 12 down? Because I'm never rolling a 12.
Right.
It's such a good system. And then you put in how many successes you have. And then it will tell you what happens. I mean, 0 successes is usually not good. But 1 or 2 successes may not be enough either. And the purple die has a success on one of the sides. So when you roll it, it's an automatic success.
Okay.
It's such a fascinating system. And then all these items you have will just change things to that. Like there was a sword that says, instead of rolling the dice, you discard, and you have a 10. Or add 2 to your red strength roll. Things like that. But that's not it. These items that you have also have QR codes on them. So as you're walking around and let's say there's a fire and it will say, try to put the fire out. And I can say, well, I'm going to make a strength test, as I'm running around and try to put this fire out. But I'm also carrying a bucket of water. So I'll just scan that and lo and behold, I didn't need to do the test. That just worked. It's so good. If you like Chronicles of Crime, you'll like this. Here's the biggest thing. And this, I'm trying to think of a way to word this that isn't so... So, Tainted Grail and Ether Fields and Seventh Continent. I love these games. They're fantastic, and they have a lot of overhead. This is just like those games without the overhead. Turns are pretty fast, and I'm really glad they capped it at 3. And by the way, so you're all doing this and going around the board, but you there's a little bit of interaction in the sense that you might do something I did. Like, I'll find a boy, and that boy's like, I need to find my lost lamb. And Eric's on the other side of the board, and he's like, there's a pile of sheep right there. I'm going to get that lamb and go deliver it to the boy. And I'm like, oh, come on. And then the boy will go away. Things move on the board. It's dynamic. Like between a turn, it might say, a fire broke out at this place over here. Replace this tile with a burning house.
Wow.
Or the merchant who was here packed up and left. And at some point, you get to what's called the finale. You accomplish your thing, and then you start the finale, and then the game is almost exclusively just being told to you from the app. So let's say the finale, and this isn't spoilers, let's say the finale is fighting a giant. We'll say, all right, you're at the castle wall, and it just kind of walks you through a short series of steps. So every turn Eric has, he's continuing through his finale. And I need to finish up my thing and get to the finale so I can beat Eric. But once someone gets in their finale, they're likely going to win. Unless they did really poorly and it takes more turns to get through the finale. And I was right under the tail. I haven't tried it solo yet because my kids and I are really enjoying it. Now, my kids are 12 and 13. The game says 14 plus.
Okay.
I don't know that that's wrong. It's grimdark. Okay. It's not... I haven't found anything really bad in it per se, but it's pretty... There's some violent... There's definitely... tales of gore sometimes. The first scenario, this is the spoiling thing, the first scenario is about a werewolf. And it's a mean werewolf, So you might walk into a room and be like, there's blood on the walls. So think about that if you want to play this with kids. My kids are just on the cusp, right? So I'm okay and I'm playing it with them. But it definitely has that to it. I think I might like it better if it was a lighter fantasy setting. It also has these little tiny miniatures that you move around. They're super tiny. I wish they were bigger. I really do. After a while, they're like, put out this miniature to represent the merchant. I'm like, you know what? It's any of them. I'm not going to hunt through these little miniatures to figure out which one. They're like tiny micro machine size miniatures.
Okay.
Anyway, I am loving this. I have played through 2 of the 5 scenarios in the base game. I have an expansion that comes with 3 more scenarios. It's going to take a while because they're very lengthy. In fact, we may have started recording this podcast slightly later because of me playing this. But it's fantastic. So that's Destinies from Lucky Duck Games.
Very, very cool. All right, Tom, I have an important question for you.
Go.
Are you a painter or a sculptor?
I was about to combine those words and realize not a good idea.
Well, Jeff can explain what exactly I'm talking about.
3, 2, 1, go.
It's time for Game Tech with Jeff Engelstein, where we find out how games really work.
One of the challenges in game design, as well as life, is improving. If you have a problem, what do you do to fix it? Is there a common thread in how people approach problem solving? A team at the University of Virginia, led by Dr. Gabriel Adams, looked at this question and published the results this April in the journal Nature. They ran a series of experiments asking people to solve 8 different types of problems, ranging from making patterns more symmetric to rearranging travel itineraries. They specifically were interested in whether people added things to solve the problems or removed them. For example, in the pattern problem, they could add or take away tiles in order to change the pattern. Now, overwhelmingly, people added rather than took away to solve problems. In the pattern problem, 80% of people added tiles and only 20% removed them. This occurred even though solving the problem through subtraction was way, way simpler. Now, of course, we prize simpler solutions. We always teach that less is more, or quote Einstein saying that everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. Writers are taught to use fewer words where possible, eliminating extraneous tiny filler words, and presenters are told to use fewer slides and have as little text as possible on each. And yet, our natural tendency is to always keep adding more and more and overstuffing whatever we're working on. Perhaps that's why we always need to stress to people to keep it simple, stupid. Without the constant reminders pulling us back towards simplicity, maybe we'll always add more and more and more. And of course, we in the gaming field are hardly immune to this effect. I do a lot of teaching and mentoring for game designers, and by far, the most consistent flaw I see in new designers' work is that they put too much into their games. There are zillions of different rules and different subsystems. Once I looked at a Civilization game that had over 20 different resources you could collect, and you actually had to purchase things with very specific combinations of these, not just use them as a general currency, and it was a mess, as you can imagine. I think part of it may be that new designers think that their first game may be their only game, so they put every single idea they have into it. Now, I myself am hardly immune to this. On Ludology, Ryan Sturm proposed the metaphor of talking about 2 different ways of designing things, sculpting and painting. In painting, you start with nothing and gradually build up your design. If you sculpt, you start with lots of stuff and chip away at it until you're happy with what's left. Personally, I am definitely a sculptor. My first published game, the Ares Project, had way too many ideas in it. I'm still very proud of it, but it certainly could have been pared down. Even today, I spend way more time removing game elements than adding them. I start big during brainstorming and chip away. Now, one area to be particularly careful about is that when you run into an edge case in your rules or something that isn't covered, the absolute simplest thing to do is to add a new rule. And sadly, that's where many designers go to first. Designer Eric Lang recently tweeted, quote, "You can solve just about any specific design issue with a game by adding a smart, targeted rule. 99% of the time, I believe that's the wrong development choice." I could not agree with that more, and it's a lesson that I've had to learn the hard way. Every rule you add makes your game harder to learn and harder to play, even if each one seems tiny and inconsequential. If you have a design problem in your game, your first effort should be to remove or combine rules to make the problem go away and not just add a rule to patch over it. Removing rules is how you achieve elegance. The same thing in life, in my opinion. Where possible, look for opportunities to reduce and simplify. Now, I don't always follow that rule. I mostly often don't follow that rule, but I understand and admire the principle. So if you're facing a problem, game-related or otherwise, take a step back and think about what you can take away to solve it, rather than what you can add. You may be surprised at where you end up. This is Jeff Engelstein with Game Tech.
Support for the Dice Tower comes from The Op, which has been creating games and memories for over 25 years. From party games like Telestrations and Blank Slate to game night favorites with Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle and the Rising series, to new games like Hues and Cues and Tapple, The Op is a one-stop shop for game night. With games for friends and family, you can create your next game night memory with The Op. Fuel your fandom with an array of licensed puzzles, dice, and accessories. The Op has a great array of games for any occasion. Looking for your next game for game night? Check out the op.games website with games for everyone, from the pop culture geek to mom and dad and your friends too. Questions.
Okay, our first question comes from Kyle. And he says he's newer to the hobby than I am, which is fine. But video games, he's a big fan of video games. And he sees a pattern in the board game world that he thinks is already played out in a video game world. So this is how Kyle sorted it out. He said Era 1 was Atari games where you just push buttons. They were very simple games. Then Era 2 was Nintendo, adding things. And instead of using the same thing over and over and over again, like Pac-Man and Space Invaders.
Yep.
You could do different things, and the industry grew significantly. Which, Nintendo kind of saved the hobby from Atari's collapse. Era 3, he says Super Nintendo and The Legend of Zelda and The Link's Awakening and stuff like that. Then Era 4, Nintendo 64. I'm sensing Kyle as a Nintendo fan here.
Yeah, he does eventually mention Sega at some point.
And 3D methods and changing stuff to 3D, like Super Mario 64. Era 5, he says another plateau of making better versions of what we've seen. He says there's a focus on flash over substance, but some flashy game substance really come through. Before we go any farther, Kyle, I'm not nearly maybe as big of a video game fan as I am a board game fan, but I would really change up the eras myself. Because, like, for example, I think in the modern era, we have seen both big, grandiose, flashy games, but we've also seen small, little games become huge, both from Bejeweled and, apps.
Candy Crush.
But also things like Animal Crossing.
Yep.
And just casual games becoming huge mega hits. Or what's that game everyone's playing on the internet where you all rush and don't knock the other person off?
The one with the beans.
Well, you guys listening know what I'm talking about. But
it's not like Among Us. It's Fall Guys.
Fall Guys and Among Us, right? These are very simple games, but there's also there's so many different eras. It would be difficult to make. But anyway, so he says, comparing to his eras, we have the Hasbro era, the Catan era, the Ticket to Ride era, and the 2012 through Kickstarter, the N64. So my question is, do you agree with the parallel? Well, Kyle, I'm very sorry here, but not even remotely. Okay. Do you foresee us following the pattern of slow value market where the major Kickstarter companies are making flashier versions of what we've seen? Or are we still in the N64 Wild West? So he says, even if you don't agree with my assessment, a segment of the history of mechanisms and revolutionary ideas in board games could be really cool. That I agree with, Kyle, and I really want to do that someday.
Okay.
I would really like to do a thing where we sit and talk through the years and how the hobby's changed. And we've done it a little bit.
Yeah.
When we do our 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I talk about those years and how they changed gaming. But what I will say is, if there's an era, I would argue that the first era of gaming, and I'm ignoring ancient gaming.
Right.
So let's say modern board gaming, the first 70 years or so of the 20th century, we just basically you had two things you could do. You could do the roll and move games from the mass market. It isn't Hasbro, actually.
Yeah.
It's Parker Brothers and Milton Bradley.
Yep.
And companies like that. And you had a smaller, very small subset of war games. And then there's another side hobby, a couple side hobbies of chess.
Yeah.
Competitive chess has been around for a while. And card games, with the big dog probably being bridge.
Sure.
It's being played, and poker and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's like the first era if we're doing eras. And all this changes there's like a transitional era. We'll call it the Renaissance. And that's probably between, like the 80s and 93. That realm there where we start seeing games from Germany, German games coming to the forefront. The Spiel des Jahres, which came out, I believe, 76 or 77.
Yeah.
That's seeing these games start to get at least well known in Germany. They're not known in America at all. The war game industry in America starts taking off. We start seeing a little bit of change in mass market games. Milton Bradley tries a few odd things like Axis and Allies and stuff like that, Cosmic Encounter, but nothing really that changes the industry. That's why I call it a renaissance. The Reformation was when Richard Garfield nailed 95 Magic the Gathering cards to the door. I guess the and I've talked about this a lot in the past. The only thing that was bigger than maybe that was the late 70s, 80s, and where D&D shows up in the background.
Yeah.
And that has a huge thing on board gaming, but for a while it was kind of underground. And of course, in the 80s, there was a big backlash against it. But Magic the Gathering from Richard Garfield and Catan, or Settlers of Catan it was called at the time, from Klaus Teuber, those two things ushered in a new era. But they weren't the only two things. The third thing there was the internet, for sure.
Yeah.
Because now people could find out about these games. You didn't just go to your game club and there was that one guy who somehow got German games. You now could find out about these games before he did.
Yeah.
So that would be the next era, this age of discovery. The late 90s, Knizia becomes king. And I would say that goes up to around 2010 maybe. But even then, that would be broken down into whole categories. Now, there was a CCG craze of the late 90s where they all came out and then they almost all fizzled out. And, meanwhile, Warhammer's its own thing in the background. It's kind of tricky to pick eras. I will say Kickstarter definitely issued in a new era, for sure. And I think we're going to look back at the year 2020 and see a huge shift there also. Because with COVID shutting down local game stores and retail stores in general, and people went online, and last year we saw a lot of publishers use Kickstarter who haven't done it before, and we're seeing more and more games go to sale online only. Like, back this Kickstarter, this will never go to retail. There's a lot of that going on, and a lot of companies doing that. So we'll see where that leads us. As to where games are being produced, I don't know. I think it's weird to say games are all flash and no substance these days. I don't think that's true at all. I always think that when people say that sort of thing, they're looking at older games with rose-colored glasses. Yes, we do have games that are all flash and no substance. But we have very substantial games where they have used mechanisms done. Like Knizia, I give Knizia a lot of grief. But he brought a lot of simple mechanisms that are used in every game now. He built the building blocks, the foundation for games where they're at now.
Yeah.
Man, I could talk about this for a really long time.
So
maybe we should do like this sometime, like talking through the history of board games.
Sure. So you agree that there are eras, just not necessarily with Kyle's divisions of them here. The one thing that Kyle talked about was this N64 era, where he said that there was sort of this, let's just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And so you ended up with a lot of not very good things. And I think I agree with that distinction as being the beginning of the Kickstarter era, when people said, oh, wait, I can make my own game. I can be my own game publisher. And so we ended up with a lot of just terrible stuff that managed to make enough money on Kickstarter to get published. And now we are seeing a more refined approach to Kickstarter and basically saying that
Have you looked at some of these Kickstarter projects? There's still people doing that.
Well, sure. But it's less. I think there's more quality on Kickstarter now than there was when things first started.
I agree that there's more quality there, but that's only because more publishers have just moved to Kickstarter in general. The dross is still there, Eric. You just don't see it. I promise you, because I look at every single Kickstarter project about board games.
Yeah.
And some of them I look at for less than half a second. Okay, there's no argument there, but there's a lot of garbage out there. But they're not getting published either. I'm arguing that. I don't know that. Why are people saying that N64 is the Wild West? That's where I'm confused.
Well, I think the N64 and like early PlayStation stuff, when, they're still getting used to what 3D games could do, there were some pretty bad early PlayStation games, some wonky N64 3D games. It's sort of new technology. We can do anything, and you realize, oh, wait, I need to be good at this.
What about the Virtual Boy?
I think that falls under the same era.
All right. Kyle, you've definitely got me thinking here. I think it would be fun to go through history here, but it would take a bit of research and going through. I mean, I could do a haphazard one, I suppose, but I think that'd be interesting. Maybe not to most people.
Our next question comes from a mystery writer, or either that or Tom just didn't put their name at the end of the question. They say, I was thinking about the mechanism of take-that games and what games fall under that category. I don't recall hearing Seven Wonders as being considered a take-that game, but I think all drafting games can end up being take-that due to hate drafting, making sure that an opponent doesn't get a particular card. Then it got me thinking about the difference in degree between take-that games and how mean a game is based on the take-that mechanisms. I can think of two ways take-that can be implemented. Actions that physically remove something from an opponent, like stealing a card, removing resources, killing minions, etc., versus actions that make it so that opponents cannot do something or cannot obtain an object. Hate drafting, maybe taking a single space in a worker placement game. Personally, when I'm playing a card and a random card is stolen, or I have to lose an X amount of resources, I don't usually like the game that much. But I love worker placement games and drafting games where strategies end up changing based on what is available, either in your hand or on the board. I was wondering if you knew of many games that are take that without losing an item or resource, etc. I think Jeff had a segment at one point where he talked about metal coins in games and that people like having the fancy resources so they are less likely to spend more if it means losing the cool resource. I wonder if a game instead just didn't allow you to get the resource instead of removing it would make people feel better and not think of it as a really mean game. I can't think of many games that use this type of action. The only one coming to mind is Smash Up, even though that has a ton of take-that cards. But there are some cards that say opponents can only play minions at this base at level 3 or higher, or something along those lines. The idea intrigues me, and I was wondering if you could think of any game that uses actions similar to this.
Okay, actually, just, and I wish I could tell you what segment it is. Jeff actually has talked about this too.
Yeah.
Where people, like, essentially, if I say, Eric, I'm going to give you $10, instead of giving you $15, Eric's okay with that. But if I said, Eric, I'm going to steal $5 from you, he has a bigger problem with that.
Yeah. Once something belongs to you, you take ownership of it and you feel worse when it's taken away as opposed to when it's denied from you in the first place?
Yes. So this is kind of a weird thing. I mean, I actually get more annoyed when someone messes me up by accident. Like if someone comes and steals 2 of my resources, I'm like, man, you jerk, I'll get you.
Yeah.
But if they're like, I'm going to go to this space because I don't know where else to go. And I'm thinking, are you kidding? My whole strategy revolved around that.
Could have gone
like,
anywhere.
I don't know, I'll do this. If you want to ever see like a serious Eurogamer get mad, do that.
Yep.
Play Puerto Rico and go, I'm just going to pick the mayor action. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, I don't know what else to do, so I'm just going to ship.
So it all depends. It depends on you, right? Now, where he says here, he's talking about games that are take that without losing an item. I mean, it all depends on what the game is. There's so many variations and shades of this.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of games we call them multiplayer solitaire because you don't do much to each other. Some games you don't do anything to each other at all. And sometimes it's just I draft the card that you could have taken. It might not even be hate drafting. I just got to it first.
Yeah.
Worker placement usually falls in that category. But cards that are sort of in each other's face, there's a lot of those. But, man, I don't know what you're looking for exactly. Like you say Smash Up, but that's like the very epitome of a take that game.
Yeah.
There's some cards in there. But even if opponents can only play minions at this base at level 3 or higher, I consider that direct attack. Like if you play, what? You jerk.
Yeah.
I don't see how that's any less.
I like the games, like worker placement games, where you can affect the price of stuff. Like, I can take this action. You can take it too, but it's going to cost you more. It might take 2 workers instead of 1. Kalis does this. I've been playing an online game of Kalis that I haven't played in a long time. But the first person to pass raises the cost of taking actions for everyone after them. So it's really inexpensive to do stuff right away, but as soon as somebody passes, suddenly it gets a lot more expensive, which may mess with your plan in getting everything you want done.
Okay. Done.
Done. Second question from our mystery writer.
These are the two branches of our service, law and order. Sorry. Go ahead.
On a similar topic, there are a lot of games that I have played where there is a deck that helps the player out. Two games that come to mind are games like Lords of Waterdeep with the Intrigue cards, or Champions of Midgard has rune cards that can be helpful bonuses. Do you know if there are any games where that deck has both helpful and potentially harmful cards in it? I think it might be an interesting push your luck where there is a chance the card is really good and can give you resources or a special item or force another player to do something, but it might also force you to do something or make you lose resources or force to give the special item to another player. And then he or she gives a game idea, a police game where you can ask the chief for help, but the chief could either be in a good mood and help you out or potentially be angry that you came to ask for their help and give you tedious work that would hamper your actions for a certain time. I couldn't think of any game that uses that type of deck. Do you know of any that do this type of card play? It would be interesting to see how well it works and if it would create an interesting game dynamic. I could think
Joe,
of two.
And his name's Joe, by the way.
His name's Joe. Hi, Joe.
All right, you think of two? Go ahead.
Okay, so one is Entdecker, Exploring New Horizons, where you're pulling tiles from face-down piles. Some of these tiles have question marks on the back of them. You can choose which tile piles you want to draw from, but you could choose to go for the question mark tiles, which may either contain big bonuses, like getting to place free workers or free money, or storms that can cause you to lose your turn or cost you extra money or other nasty things that you don't want to happen. So it's that risk versus reward. Do I go for the possible bonus, or do I stick with the tiles that I'm sure are going to be something good? The other would be that old chestnut Merchant of Venus. Exploring the question mark tiles, the asteroids floating around the board. They can hold amazing space junk that can give you a huge advantage in the game, or it can be a big hazard that's going to slow you way down and cost you extra money.
Yeah, I mean, there's things like Mystic Veil, which has your own deck, and the more cards you draw, you get good stuff, but you could also bust.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. First of all, Eric just gave examples of tiles, and he specifically said decks of cards, but whatever.
The new version, I think, is a deck of cards.
But that's the thing. What you're asking for here, Joe, exists anyway. If there's a deck that has good and bad things in it, first of all, that's the same as rolling dice to see if something good happens to you or bad something. Like you said, the police captain, you can draw good and bad. And there are decks that have this. There are decks where you draw cards. And I apologize off the top of my head. I don't know what games these are per se.
Sure.
Where you can draw a card and there's an event card that's good or bad. But I'll tell you this. I highly dislike that because it's not push your luck. It's just randomness.
Yeah.
You're just drawing a card and it could be good. It could be bad. That's not fun to me unless I know the percentages. So like if I know this deck has 70% good cards and 30% bad cards, I could think of one. There's the fishing game, Key Largo. Key Largo had different decks that you would go through to like search for fish, and there were like monsters in the deepest deck, or like squids or stuff, so there was cooler treasure, and there's some other things that do that too, where there's decks that get worse as you go through them, and I don't mind that per se, but I don't know, that a lot of this stuff can just be done by rolling dice or other situations, but
Sure.
It does exist.
Yeah, it's definitely
not like
a
new idea.
Yeah. An event deck. A lot of events are good, bad things.
All right, so I'm going to jump to our last question here. Jim has a couple questions here because he and his group, his friends, are starting to game together again, finally. That's where we're all at, right? Finally getting together in small groups. And he's playing in a pub. And this is in China, he said, so probably much quieter there. They've taken things very seriously in China. Anyway, he says it's quiet, and then it gets louder as the evening goes by. And so he brings and introduces games, and now he's moving to heavier games. So his questions are, he's started with light games and is moving to heavier games. He has 2 questions. They're very different. One is, do you have any recommendations for teaching heavier games? I'm bringing Sword and Sorcery this week. That's a big dungeon crawler. Do you have methods or strategies to teach complicated games in a simple way? And then the second question is, any recommendations for good pub games that can be played when it gets noisier and people get more drunk? My serious answer to number 2 is I'm out. I don't find playing with people who are even a little drunk to be fun.
Well, that's true.
They act stupid. They make dumb decisions. I don't know where the fun in the game is. Whenever someone says you got to be drunk to play that game, that's code for it's a bad game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not thinking necessarily that you have to be drunk to enjoy this game. I think as people have a couple of drinks in them, they might be a little tipsy and just want something
and make
a little
bad
less
decisions.
Cognitive. I would say, so the game I talked about at the top of the show, Pass the Pot. I think that's the sort of thing you'd be looking for here, where you don't have to think too hard, roll some dice, I'll keep rolling, and I'm good, I'll stay here. And earn a couple of plastic chips. You also want a game that has sturdy enough components that a spill isn't going to cause too much of a problem here. Yeah.
All right, the other question, we've talked about this a lot, so we're going to skirt this one a little bit, Jim, briefly. But my recommendation is always, if possible, if you know the game well, start with the end game conditions. Mm-hmm. Explain really clearly what a player is doing on their turn, and then try to explain as little else as possible until it happens. Make sure that the people playing the game aren't too competitive.
Yeah.
I think every time I game, I just said it this past Saturday, I said to one of the players, I'm like, look, there's no money on the line. Just pick something.
Yeah.
If it's a bad choice, it's okay. We're not going to mock you. You're not going to, be banished from our game group. Just pick a choice and see what happens. Oh, you picked that choice, and this is how that works. And that helps people learn a lot better. By the way, that's why Merchant's Cove is a difficult game to teach.
Yeah.
Because I'd be like, I'm going to take my turn. Watch. Da, 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 da. You're not doing any of that.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Starting with the end game is always a good thing. Just sample turns. If you are able to teach as little as possible and just jump in, that's always good. And if you really are playing something super dense and complex, maybe some prep is in order. Like if you're getting together on Thursday and you're going to play something, heavy, you can say, hey, I found this cool how to play video online, or I found Tom's review online, and you can at least see what the components look like and get a sense of the gameplay. Even if we aren't going to learn every single rule that way, you're sort of hitting the ground running when we get together to play.
Alrighty, well, that's our questions. It's time for some numeration.
It's a Dice Tower Top 10.
The Dice Tower's Top 10 list is brought to you by Game Nerds at GameNerdZ.com.
Now, I read a comment, I think it was on a Board Game Geek somewhere, where someone was like, finally!
They're finally done.
They're finishing with the alphabet. You know what? I make no apologies. I like doing stuff like this because it lets us talk about games we might not normally do so. But yes, finally.
Yes,
finally. I will say
it's been a journey.
It's slightly easier on the person who comes up with topics when they only have to do it once a month rather than twice a month. Not only do I pick these twice a month, I also pick the top 10 topics for the video channel. And so I'm constantly like, I try not to do them. And we've done, I think our record is we did a top 10 within 18 months of each other once. Haven't we, I think?
We did. I think there might have been one that you tried to do within 6, and I was like, we just did this.
Yeah, I tried it.
But we stopped it before we got that far.
It's pretty tricky. And then we title them differently sometimes, too. Like, top 10 games I hate. Top 10 games I loathe. Those are the same thing. But anyhow,
yes.
We haven't ever done this before, though. I know that.
No.
Even, I don't even think I did it when I did this as a video series because... this was actually easier for me than many of the letters.
A little. This was still a relatively short list for me. I think I haven't played nearly as many as you have.
Yeah, so we'll just jump right into this with numbers, and that's pretty much it. These are games where there's a number at the beginning, so I haven't decided in the Dice Tower library if, for example, the game is called 1912, if I would put it under N also. Probably not. But sometimes, yes, and we'll mention that a little bit later.
Okay. Let's kick it off.
Number 10.
I'm going to begin with 1825, which is one of the 18XX series games, a pretty well-regarded one, if Board Game Geek is any indication. It is a railroad game, a stock game, a rather complex game. As you're building track and earning stock in various shipping companies, and I remember being somewhat annoyed in the dice resolution. There were actions you could take, and you had to roll dice to see if it worked, and I found that a little frustrating, but I certainly didn't want to let this list go by and not have an 18XX game on it. So number 10, 1825.
On the other hand, I am quite content to allow this game go by with an 18XX game on it. That being said, I understand that people love them. There are 6 of them in the library. Yep. All right. My number 10 is 5 Minute Marvel. Now, there's 5 Minute Dungeon, and there's also 5 Minute Deduction, I believe. But 5 Minute Marvel is currently my favorite. It's a quick, silly game. It's actually more than 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes per round, but you play multiple rounds. Each person has a character. You're just playing cards, trying to defeat villains as fast as you can, but your character also has special cards you can play that help beat the villains. It's silly, but it works really well. It's almost party game style. I like it a lot. 5 Minute Marvel.
Number 9.
Number 9 is 12 Thieves. It's a Queen Games game, which you may know from its original title, Thief of Baghdad. This game has a bunch of mosques, and you're trying to sneak your thieves in to steal treasures. And so you have to place your guards and then smuggle your people into those rooms and try to steal the treasure chests. And as the stack of treasure chests gets lower, it takes more thieves to steal them because I guess security gets better? I don't know. It's basically an abstract, but a cute little one. 12 Thieves, my number 9.
Yeah, this one to me is just too abstract. This was actually nominated for the Spiel des Jahres. It lost.
It was, which is what put it on my radar originally.
It's same here. Back then, we almost never even heard of the games when they were on the nomination list. So they would come out and they had a nomination list of 5. And I was like, we got to play all 5. I remember going to Origins. I will play all the nominees. And that year, Thieves was the one that just blew me away. And I was like, oh, this is so amazing. I played 12 Thieves and I was like, meh. But
yeah.
My number 9 is higher on Eric's list, and I can't think of a good pun here, actually. Sorry. No, because the game's so serious, I don't want to make light of it.
Yeah, it's true.
Number 8.
Number 8 is 11 Nimmt. This is based on another similarly titled card game. This, instead of having multiple rows of cards, you're building one row of cards, and you have to play within a certain number range, specifically 10. But if you play more than 10 above the number that's at the top of the pile, you have to take the pile, which is why 11 takes, 11 Nimmt. A nice variant on the style of game that you may be familiar with if you've played other versions, but a fun one. Number 8, 11 Nimmt.
My number 8 is 10 Minute Heist. Now, before you say, oh, you just did 5 Minute Marvel, this is actually a very different game. 10 Minute Heist is just basically, it's actually called 10 Minute Heist, The Wizard's Tower. But you're a thief, and you're going in trying to get things out. This is from Daily Magic Games. And you build a tower, and you're going from room to room stealing items, but it's one of those games where you could drop down as far as you want on a tower to grab an item you want, but then you can't go back up. It's a simple game about collecting stuff and trying to have the most of different items with a few special abilities and stuff thrown in. Really quick game. I really like this one. It's a great filler. 10 Minute Heist.
Yeah, I did get a chance to play this at a convention. Some kind folks taught it to me and my son, and we did enjoy that. It was a good one.
Number 7.
My number 7 is Tom's serious pick from number 9. That is Dos de Mayo. It reenacts a particular battle in which the indigenous forces they lose the battle, but the French are attacking, and the way that the game is structured, it's sort of this asymmetric thing that the indigenous forces need to hold out longer than history dictated, and that is how you win the game. There's no way to really defeat the French. It's just, can you do better than history? It's an interesting asymmetric war game. Not usually my cup of tea, but this is a very well done product. Dos de Mayo, my number 7.
Yeah, I like Dos de Mayo. I have a very deluxe little version of it. This company has not made too many games that I have enjoyed that much, but this one really struck my fancy because it's so simple and it feels like you're playing a pretty heavy war game in many ways, but you're not. It's a really simple little game. One side is going to lose, but you're not going to lose the game. You're going to lose the battle. So you're just trying to lose as little as possible, if that makes sense, which I didn't think I would like, and I ended up doing so. It's a pretty horrific event, but it's not made light of or fun of at all. It's actually made from the folks from that country, so Dos de Mayo is pretty good. My number 7's higher on Eric's list, but I'm going to claim that's because when he drew his opening hand, he won right there.
Number 6.
My number 6 is going to show up on Tom's list, but that's okay because he's my partner for this game.
My number 6 is higher on Eric's list. I'll get you a way you weren't expecting.
Yeah, you're not my partner in this one.
Number 5.
My number 5 was Tom's number 7. I specifically said 10 Days in Europe, which I have a copy called Europa Tour. It was one of the ones that wasn't named as a 10 Days series originally. 10 Days in Europe is sort of a Racco-style game where you're trying to get your cards positioned in a path. Going from country to country, utilizing just simple border crossings or vehicles, even plane rides, to get around the board efficiently and getting these cards in an order that's going to be one continuous path. And so you're drafting new cards and getting rid of old cards and making sure you don't get rid of something that other people are going to be able to use. It's light, but it also teaches you geography, which is pretty cool. 10 Days in Europe specifically, Tom likes the whole series.
Yeah, and the reason I put the series together is because I didn't want to have 5 of them on this list.
Right.
But yeah, I like them all. They're all essentially the same game, just like they have small variations, just like Ticket to Rides do. Man, I'm glad this game is being reprinted, but it was huge when Out of the Box Publishing did it, and it's really faded off the scene now. And the new versions are nice. But they're being printed from a company in, I believe it's Taiwan. So, maybe they'll come back someday. But 10 Days in Europe is a pretty good one. I think I would pick Africa as my favorite.
Okay.
Oh, that was Eric's. My number 5 is 1989. Now, it's 1989 Dawn of Freedom is the name of the game. This is a sequel to Twilight Struggle, in many ways, one of the same designers. It's about the fall of communism, and one person's the communist player trying to delay it as long as possible, and the other person's the freedom forces, and it's all in Eastern Europe. It's really well done. I don't think it's as good as Twilight Struggle, but it's pretty close, and I like it a lot. A more complicated game. It's the most complicated game on my list, probably, but I like it a lot. 1989.
Number 4.
My number 4 is going to show up on Tom's list, but I'm okay letting him talk about it because I need to find this magnifying glass. I seem to have misplaced it.
My number 4 is First and Goal. This is a football game. I'm not a huge football fan, although I like the strategy of football, the different plays, and I'm talking about American football here. Steve and Glenn made a dice game back and forth that I really enjoyed. You both play a card, you reveal the cards, it tells you how many dice the person rolls. That's it. But they added expansions, and then all the teams were very asymmetrical, and that really, really enhanced my enjoyment of the game. So it's a lot of fun, especially if you buy a few of the teams that came out from R&R Games first and goal.
Number 3.
Seven Wonders Duel takes the number 3 position on my list. It was also Tom's number 6. This is, of course, the 2-player version of Seven Wonders, where you've got the cards arranged in sort of a pattern, a grid or a pyramid, and you are drafting these cards just like you would in the card game, but you can see mostly what your opponent is going to be able to draft when you take this card. There are some face down that will reveal, and you're trying to not only get the stuff you need, but prevent your opponent from getting the stuff they need, and it's much more clear in the 2-player duel version of Seven Wonders. It is a very solid game, a nice tug of war, sometimes literally, in Seven Wonders Duel, my number 3.
Yeah, I really like Seven Wonders Duel. I think it's one of the few games where the new game, the card game, the duel game has surpassed the original game in popularity. And for me, Seven Wonders did not make my list. I think it's a fine game, fine game. But Seven Wonders Duel I really enjoy, and I think it just plays a little faster for me. My number 3 was Eric's number 6, and that's 1775 Rebellion. Now, again, I could have put a lot of games on my list here from Academy games in this series. Yep. And in fact, 1812 was number 11. But 1775 Rebellion is my favorite. These are light war games, but it actually feels like an area control game. An area control game with a little bit of dice and an alternate way for the colonies to win. It's a very simple game, and as Eric mentioned, you could play 2 versus 2, and it works well. Although I played it a lot, just 1 versus 1 too. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. But simple, fun game. This is the lightest of war games, but I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, I really like the way, so even if you're playing 1 versus 1, you have sort of 2 factions that you're controlling, and the way the turn order happens, it's a draw, sort of a blind draw, and so there's the possibility that both of your factions might go right next to each other right away, or you may get to move one of them and then not get to move the other half until your opponent gets to move twice, and that I find it interesting. Usually I don't like that sort of thing, but it's kind of a neat twist on who gets the initiative and is able to get the jump on their opponent and who gets to respond to what just happened. It's a cool twist. I liked it. My number 6.
Okay, you're number 6.
Yes.
Sorry.
My turn. It was my number 6 and Tom's number 3, 1775 Rebellion.
Number 2.
Number 2 is 6 Nimmt, which I sort of alluded to, talking about 11 Nimmt. This is the classic card game. Very, very simple. I mean, it's almost dead simple. This is almost one of those that you could play in the bar that we were talking about, if you could protect the cards and not get them soggy. You're blind bidding almost. You're choosing a card face down, and then everybody flips up, and you're hopefully going to position the cards into the grid and assortment without taking the cards. The 6th card will take cards in 6 Nimmt, and you're trying to avoid doing that so that you don't get the little bullheads that are negative points. You can play both very casually with all of the cards or a more strategic version where you remove all but the cards necessary for playing with that number of players. I like it both ways. This works for large groups of people. I think you can play up to 10. There are very few games that'll play up to 10 and still be an entertaining experience. I really enjoyed the utility of 6 Nimmt, which is why it's my number 2.
Yeah, I get it. And by the way, folks, this has many different names. Slide 5, yes. 5 Alive.
Category 5.
Yeah, although that's a weird one. It's a bunch of hurricanes. I'm like, what? Doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's an easy game to play, and I'll play it, but it's very, very simple. Yeah. My number 2 is 1960. This one has continually gone up for me. I remember when I first played this, and I thought, it's not as good as Twilight Struggle. It's good, but not as good as Twilight Struggle. And you know what? I still think that, but it's so much more accessible. It follows the election between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy in 1960, which was an incredibly close election. And this, especially since the events of that year are now, 61 years in the past. I feel like I can play it with someone without people getting mad about politics. I hope so. I'm playing with my 81-year-old grandfather. Like, oh, well, like, let it go, Grandpa. But that to me does help, right? I don't think I would want to play a game called 2020.
Yeah.
That was an election game because it would just, even if you could, I think that I could take out the emotions and play it, and I could play either side emotionlessly. That would be difficult. 1960, it's a whole lot easier because it's in the past. And you're talking about events and things. It's so well done. It does a good job at showing you how the electoral system works. It's a really fun game. Highly recommend it. 1960.
And finally, number 1.
So Tom mentioned that Seven Wonders Duel has totally surpassed Seven Wonders for him, but I put it in the number 1 position ahead of the 2-player version because I enjoy playing with more players. Seven Wonders is a card drafting game. You're collecting science cards and technology cards, resource cards to help build your particular corner of civilization, military cards that go after your opponents. You're mostly concerned with just the 2 neighbors to your side, but you are drafting cards from the whole table. So something that you send across the table might get taken by somebody across, and something that they send to you might be exactly the card you need. I sort of like the interaction of the multiplayer game just a little bit better, which is why Seven Wonders is my number 1.
There's no way I'm going to knock this, and it's fantastic. It's just that there's so many other drafting games I think I'd rather play. But if you said let's play Seven Wonders, I'm in. However, my number 1 was so easy here. It was first game I wrote down, and that's Seventh Continent. Eric's number 4. I like this for every reason I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Destinies, because Destinies is like Seventh Continent, but Seventh Continent. The main thing about Seventh Continent is the cool exploration of some massive map and the 1920s pulp fiction elements to it that I just really like, because it starts out and you're like, this is the 1920s. There's nothing really weird going on, is there? Is there? There is, folks. But it's muted. It's not like everywhere. It's not in your face. You just might find some supernatural thing, kind of, sort of. Think King Kong-ish. That kind of supernatural thing. Like you might be on the island of Kong for all you know. You're not.
Yeah.
But I love it. It's long. It's very story driven. I don't think I've ever beaten a game, and I don't think I ever care. I just want to play it because I like to see what happens next.
Yeah. I agree. I look at Seventh Continent with longing, however. It's one that I've never really found a group for, and I think I just need to commit to playing it solo. But the setup and takedown worries me.
It's not so bad to save it. Besides, someday in your life, you get one of those tables and you can just put it inside the table.
That is a good idea. I did just put a deposit down on a table that has those leaves, so that might be my plan.
Well, there you go. All righty. Well, let's take a look at the people's choices here. So, number 20, Dos de Mayo. I was surprised about this one. I was surprised Eric had on this list just because I thought this was a fairly esoteric game.
Yeah, it was one of my first review copies that I received and enjoyed.
All right, number 19, 221B Baker Street.
Oh, yeah.
Number 18, Three Wishes. This is a little micro game that, if I remember correctly, Eric, you and I played several times at an Origins, right? We were in that suite.
Possible.
We were in that big suite that we had there and playing it on the table. Maybe you weren't there.
I may not have been there because I think that I played this with the family and not with you.
All right, well, it wasn't fun at all then. All right, my number...
Yeah, it was some other person.
People's choice. Number 16 is 1754 Conquest of French and Indian War. That's part of that Academy game series that 1775 is.
Oh, that's 16. What's 17?
Oh, 17. I'm sorry, I missed 17. And I better not miss him because I got called out for that last week. 500. This is from Waddington's. It's from 1904. It's a trick-taking style game.
Wow.
Yeah, it looks okay. Anyway, 16 was 1754 Conquest of French and Indian War. Just like I said, it's like 1775 Rebellion. 15 is 1989 Dawn of Freedom. 14 is 5211. This is a card game from Plan B Games.
Yeah, or isn't it Next Move? Isn't it?
Well, Next Move is a division of Plan B's. So yeah.
But it's that series where all the titles are four letters or numbers.
I won't be upset if now that they're bought by Asmodee, they stop that.
You gotta have a gimmick.
Yeah, 13 is 5 Minute Dungeon. I put 5 Minute Marvel, but Dungeon's much more popular. It was in Target, I think, for a while. 12 is 13 Days, the Cuban Missile Crisis. This game is essentially a very, very, very condensed version of Twilight Struggle. 11 is 10 Days in the USA. It's the only one that made the People's Choice. But like I said, they're hard to find these days. 10 is 1812, The Invasion of Canada. That was my number 11. Very good game. It was the first game in that series. 9 is 5 Tribes.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's spelled with F. You put it on your F list, didn't you?
I did. Yes, I'm sure. If it was spelled out, these were all numerals that we were.
Sure, but okay, so this is something I'm pretty proud of. In the Dice Tower library book, so there's big notebooks there. If you look up 5 Tribes, it will be in both places.
Okay.
I do this with a lot of things. Like, for example, if it has the word the, I put it under the, but I also put it under the first word after the. 6 Nimmt. I mean, most of these games, actually, I'll spell it out. If it's 7 Wonders, I'll put it under SEVEN Wonders, too.
Okay.
Not 18 XX games. That's if you're looking at.
Well, I get
E.
that makes sense, because if somebody's like, "Hey, go look up 7 Wonders," you might look under S if you haven't seen that. Like, I've heard 7 Wonders is good. I wonder if I should check that out in the library. You might not know it's a numeral 7 and not the S.
Right. Also, for example, The Voyages of Marco Polo will be under Marco Polo. So I will. This is fine. I didn't do this myself, but yes. All right, number 8, 878 Vikings Invasions of England. This is another game from the series of 1775.
Oh,
I told you I'm going to put a lot of them on the list. 7, 1960. 6, 1775 Rebellion. So the people agree with us. This is their favorite also. 5, 51st State. I was just looking at this. We got a new expansion for it in, so Z was excited. Moloch expansion for this game. 4, 7th Continent. I don't know how 6 Nimmt beat 7th Continent, but that matches Eric. That was 4 and 2 for Eric, 4 and 3 for the people.
Yep.
And 2 and 1, not even close. 2 was 7 Wonders, and 1 7 Wonders Duel.
There you go.
All righty, folks. Well, thanks for joining us again. Folks, if you liked us and wanted to back our Kickstarter and missed it, the Pledge Manager is closing soon. It's on GameFound. Just go to dicetowerkickstarter.com. I built the puzzle. It's framed. It's on the wall of the studio. It looks fantastic. So
nice.
we bought a couple extra of those puzzles. Eric, I'll make sure you get one.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to that.
And yeah, so if you want some of other swag for the Dice Tower, that's a place to find it. And of course, our Facebook group at Board Game Geek, our Facebook group is popping. I think there's like almost 20,000 people in it now. You ask some board game questions, they'll answer them.
Wow.
Anywho, I will see you all next time. Until then, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode number 710 was recorded on May 13th, 2021. Mandy, Tom, and Suzanne join you next week, and in 2 weeks, Tom and I put together our top 10 mean and nasty games. Support for this podcast comes from listeners like you. Thank you for spreading the word. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. Find out more about the fund's mission and how you can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom, Mandy, Suzanne, and Eric, with production assistance from Roy Kennedy, Mike DeLisio, Chris Yee, and Rob Searing. Our theme was composed by Timothy Pinkham. Our rallying cry for baseball fans upset with the calling of balls and strikes provided by After the Umpire. And hosting is provided by Game Nerds, your all-in-one solution for all your nerdy needs at GameNerds.com. We love feedback. Visit the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com. Email us at tom@dicetower.com or eric@dicetower.com, or follow us on Facebook. And of course, you can find more from the Dice Tower Network, including Tabletop Game Talk, Dukes of Dice, Board Games Insider, the D6 Generation, Ludology, and Dice Tower Now at Dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. Now, what would have been an epic finale is if we had done the top 10 list with numerals and had number 10 be a 10, and then number 9 be a 9. But then, what would be number 7?
I'm super confused. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, if number 10 was like 10-minute heist, and number 9 is the 9 something, but, what would number 7 be? You'd have to choose between Seven Wonders Duel, and Seventh Continent. So, I abandoned that idea.